There we go. I didn't realize I was muted at all. Normally, I'm muted on Streamlabs. I'm not muted here. But we should be back now. We should be here. So hello, everybody. What's a nightmare now is there's two different ways for me to be muted. I can be muted on the mic itself, or I can be muted in Streamlabs. So a little bit of a nightmare. Anyway, it is Mindful Monday. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome, Kath. Welcome anybody else who's in here. I'm glad to be back with you guys. We played some poker yesterday. It didn't go great. That's okay. Hello, Final Table Boy. The regulars are in the house. Welcome, welcome. Hope you guys are doing well today. It is Monday. It is the start of another week, and it's the start of my last week of quote-unquote work for the year. I'm still going to be streaming, but I'm only doing my poker stuff, my coaching and things like that this week, and then next week and the week after, taking some time off to enjoy the holidays, but also to prepare for moving. So, interesting week from me. Cricket, hello, welcome. Haven't really seen you this morning, so good morning. I've been up and about and haven't seen you, but I'm glad to have everybody here. And today we're going to have another episode of Mental Methods in 56 minutes from now. And I'm excited for that because the topic for today is resistance and acceptance. And it's a really interesting topic, and I think I've got some good stuff on the slides. I'm quite pleased with how the slides turned out. Some of you may have seen one that I tweeted out a moment ago or a while ago today. So I'm excited for that. I managed to wake up 10 minutes ago. Great. That's good. I remember you saying last night that you were going to set an alarm so that you made sure that you woke up before my stream. I hope you got to sleep okay. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing well. It's Mindful Monday, so I did and I turned it off. Oh, you just slept through it. Fair enough. Sometimes you just got to sleep through the alarm. You know, it happens. So yeah, today's Mindful Monday, and the question for today is, how are you really feeling today? So in the spirit of full disclosure, how am I feeling? Well, I'm actually, physically, I feel really good, which is great. I've been doing a bit more fasting in the early portions of the days lately, sort of waiting till about 4 o'clock before I eat something, as opposed to eating at about 11 a.m. noon before I go on air. That's been doing really well for me. I've been feeling really good physically. I did some yoga this morning, which was great. Felt pretty good, pretty well recovered. Outside of that, I'm obviously disappointed that yesterday didn't go particularly well on the poker side. Biggest tournament of the year, and we just didn't really get any good luck at all. But that's how it goes sometimes. So it is what it is. We're not too unhappy or too disappointed about that. One thing I am kind of mad about right now is the fact that I can hear construction work outside my house. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it occurred to me this morning when I woke up to the sound of construction work at about 7:30 in the morning that, and Cricket, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we moved in here a year ago into this place, and I don't think there's been a time where there hasn't been construction work going on behind the house, on the street behind the... Oh, cat alert. There's a cat. Cat alert emoji, or emote time. That was Gargoyle that just walked past. Yeah, so I don't think there's been a time since we moved in excuse me, since we moved in here where there's been no construction work. And I am pretty frustrated by that. So there's a certain element of resistance coming up for me towards that. And yeah, it pretty much is typical Vegas. There is constant construction work going on around here. But I get the feeling our new neighborhood is possibly going to be far enough away from that kind of thing that we might actually be okay. We might be pretty quiet where we're going to be soon. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a positive. But yeah, guys, I'm curious how you guys are doing. How is everybody doing in chat? How was everybody's weekend? How is everybody feeling in the lead up to the holidays? Obviously, it's it's a stressful year when it comes to thinking about the holidays because we all have a lot of considerations to make as far as what our holiday plans are. It's going to be very difficult to have the same type of holiday plans that we would usually have, and I can certainly sympathize with everybody who's maybe struggling as a result of that. But I think that the fact that we have opportunities to hang out in stream and connect with one another and get to know people through the medium of the internet, that's something to be thankful for. So I'm grateful for that. But yeah, in terms of how I'm feeling, I'm doing pretty well, I think. But there is a little bit of disappointment about yesterday. I'm not gonna lie. I think that it's funny though, because I think that there's like when it comes to poker tournaments, for me, there's like a thing where when it's a really stressful event and you bust, or when it's like a really important event and you bust out, there's almost like a small part of you that's like, okay, it's done. It's like it's a little bit of relief. So there's a little bit of that too going on for me. Weekend was pretty hard for me. Luckily, I went back to work today and it got better throughout the day. Good. I'm glad to hear that, Kath. That's awesome. The end of the year stresses me out. The pressure to meet others' expectations in particular. Oh yeah, tell me about it. I mean, there's a lot of mental health considerations around the idea of feeling pressure to meet expectations anyway, right? I mean, we all, I think, feel some degree of pressure on a day-to-day basis when it comes to the expectations of family and friends around just a lot of basic stuff, and then on top of that, when we have the added element of the holidays, when we have the added element of there are all these things that we're expected to do and rituals that we're kind of expected to engage in, it can become really stressful. And right now in the US, I am pretty separate from the rest of my family, not least because of geography, but I'm also not talking to a lot of them. Like I'm not in communication right now with my mother or my father. I haven't been talking to my dad for about 8 years. Haven't spoken to my mom or my sister in about 4 years. And there's a lot of sort of history and I don't know, family complications that go in line with the holidays, and I think everybody who has any kind of strained relationship with family, or everybody who has been through experiences with family where maybe the relationship is not, maybe it's a bit uncomfortable, or it's not always easy to sort of know where each person is coming from, or the family doesn't communicate very well, or the family is a little bit dysfunctional. There's a lot of complications there that can arise around the holidays. Hello, Lady Ponyta. Welcome. One of the regulars. The regulars are back. I'm glad to have some of the regulars here. I gotta tell you what, guys. I don't know why I've been noticing this more lately. It's got to be the cold weather, really. But like, living in Vegas, living in the desert, my hands get so freaking dry, and I am like so, and my face and just my whole body is just so dry at this time of year. Oh, that was a cat alert. There we go. So forgive me if you see me like frantically applying moisturizer to my hands, or lotion to my hands, because it's crazy living in the desert when the weather is really cold. Burt's Bees hand salve. Yeah, I should try that. I have some Burt's Bees like lip stuff right here in front of me. I gotta get the Burt's Bees hand salve. Yeah, the relationship with my family is pretty good, but I still feel pressure to be forced happy on Christmas and stuff. Yeah, and the gifts too. I feel you on that one. Cricket and I don't really do Christmas gifts. We sort of agreed at first that when we got together, we sort of said like we want to spend time together on Christmas and on birthdays and things like that instead of doing gifts. And it's honestly just such an upgrade to, I think, our relationship as a whole, just the fact that we're not putting each other in this position of constantly stressing out as to like what we're going to get the other one. Like, we still get each other gifts, we still buy each other stuff, but we just don't do it we do it like as a surprise a lot of the time, you know. And we don't do it like as a thing where we feel pressured by a certain time of year or a certain day or something like that. And I think that that's a huge upgrade for us. So get yourself a spouse like mine who is completely cool with being very relaxed about gift giving. She's the best. I'm not sure if I'll be home in time. Do you mean home in time for the holidays, Pony? What are you referring to? I'm not sure. Luckily my boyfriend's relaxed as well. That's good. That's good. You're on the right track there, Kath. You're Cricket loves complimenting me. Thank you, Cricket. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're on the right track if you have a relationship where you're not putting a ton of pressure on each other to be oh wow, that was a high-speed cat alert right there. That was Beef, I think. He just like, did you guys see that? He just like shot past. Did you guys see that? That was great. I gotta turn away like this so that when there's a cat, you guys can actually see it. I gotta do this. This is cool, right? I can do this. Just not sure what's gonna happen. Stuff is weird. Yeah. Everything is very weird right now. 2020 is a weird year. And that's cool, Kath. I'm glad to hear it. I think the number one thing that any of us who go through any kind of mental health ups and downs, like the number one thing that we need is support, you know, and just having even one person in your life who's just incredibly supportive. Wow, that was a double cat alert. Oh my God, did you guys just see that? Did you guys just see them chase each other down the hall? That was amazing. I'm gonna clip that. Can we clip that? That was outstanding. That was great. Oh man, we got. I can't believe that. Yeah, we've got to get that. That was serious zoomies right there. Oh my gosh. I hope they do that again. I hope they do that again. Double cat alert. Yeah, I mean, I think in the new house, I have to make sure that there's some possibility of that happening again. We have to have a setup where I can have the door open and the cats just zoom past the door. I miss my kitty. Oh, Pony, yeah, it's tough to be away from an animal, especially if you lost one. But I'm very grateful for these cats. They keep us smiling, that's for sure. Every day they give us something to smile about. Two little goofballs. What was I talking about before? Yeah, support. So we all need some kind of support, right? And I'm super grateful that I have Cricket to support me. And I think that if anything, one of the things that people struggle with the most, or a lot of people who have this kind of mental health struggle that a lot of us do, is they don't have a support network. You know, they don't have enough of a network of people behind them that can uplift them in a certain way, where they get the support they need when they need it, you know. And that's one of our bigger challenges as a society, to kind of get that fixed, or get that problem addressed. I just realized I was looking at on stream I have, because I'm streaming to YouTube now as well. I'm streaming to YouTube right now just so that this broadcast will be saved. What was I saying? I have multi-stream chat, so I have the option of a chat that shows me YouTube and Twitch, or I just have Twitch chat. And if I use the multi-stream chat, some stuff doesn't show up. Like on Twitch, when someone redeems something, doesn't show up. And certain other things don't show up. So I just realized I was looking at the multi-stream chat and I had to like frantically go, oh no, maybe I missed a bunch of, maybe I missed something, maybe I missed somebody redeeming something or whatever, but looks like I didn't, so we're good. But yeah, this this concept of support networks is crucial, I think, and it's been interesting for me because I didn't have much of a support network outside of cricket until I started streaming, and now I feel like I have a bunch of people, a lot of you guys, and you know, maybe a lot of other people who've reached out to me since I started streaming to say, like, if you go through a rough patch or whatever, feel free to reach out. Like, I'm happy to talk and stuff like that. And it's like, it's crazy because all I had to do in order to get people to start reaching out and to build a support network was sort of admit that I needed one, almost, you know. And evening, Smithy. Welcome. All the regulars are here. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. Thank you for joining us on the poker stream yesterday. I thought I made you a mod yesterday. No, I made Heiser a mod. I'm gonna make you a mod as well. I'm gonna make Smithy a mod. Smithy's one of the regulars. All right, Smithy, you're now a mod. Congrats. Round of applause for Smithy for being promoted to mod. I promoted Heiser Flipper to mod yesterday because he was very helpful, giving some answers to some of the newcomers in stream. And I'm promoting Smithy now. He's one of our mods on Discord. He's been very active in helping to boost the community on Discord. Smithy's a mod now. So congrats, Smithy. I don't know if you wanted mod privileges, but you've got them. You don't have to use them. Brandishing all the power. Yeah, you get to brandish the banhammer now. You get to wield the banhammer. I should really paint this like a Thor hammer, shouldn't I? That's the banhammer. I think we all feel the same way here in support. Yeah, thank you, FTB. I want this stream to be a support network for people who need it. You know, I want to have this community be a place where people can come because they know they're going to get a kind of support that they might be maybe lacking in their day-to-day life, you know. And I think these days a lot of us are lacking that kind of support in our day-to-day, you know. A lot of us are in a position where maybe the people around us don't necessarily share the ins and outs of their lives with us and vice versa, and so kind of ends up in this situation where everybody sort of clams up on it to hold the hammer. You're welcome. You're most welcome. I should get everybody. I should get everybody one of these, right? All the mods, I should just mail you a physical hammer to celebrate your mod status. I finally speak way more openly with this group than anywhere else. I'm glad to hear it, man. I'm really glad to hear it. I hope that, you know, that's the case for other people. And even if it's only the case for you, or if it's only the case for a few people, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that. Untrapping 12, welcome back. Good to have you with us again. Thank you for being here. I hope you're doing well. Is this the extended AMA we were talking about yesterday? Not quite. The extended one is going to be on Thursday. So the Thursday is basically going to be 2 hours of this instead of 1 hour of this, just to see kind of, you know, how that goes, and to see if having a bit more opportunity, a bit more time for the conversation, maybe that, you know, produces a little bit of a deeper chat, you know. It's a challenge for me to just like sit down and just be like, let's talk for 2 hours. It's hard, but it's interesting. Herr Formio, welcome. Hey, I'm glad to have you back with us as well. Okay, and we just update each other with everything in our progress. Yeah, I mean, we're the channel is a place for people to constantly just check in, and I don't necessarily want to, you know, impose too much on like this is how we're gonna do it. It's just a space for people to come in to ask questions about whatever I might be able to help with from my own experience with depression and anxiety. It's a space for people to share advice with each other, all sorts of things. I think there's a ton of people in chat with a lot of advice to share. Monobrow147, welcome. Good to have you with us again. I think the problem with support networks is working out who's genuine and worth trusting. I think people are more likely to let you down in general, sadly. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think what's important to note is that perspective of people are more likely to let you down, whether you believe that or whether you believe like people are basically good and usually won't let you down, either of those two perspectives, it's always going to be based on your personal experience, right? So we all have beliefs about human beings that are grounded in the experiences that we've had, because it's just impossible for us to be any other way than that. Like, our brains are at least partially evidence-based. So if people are behaving like assholes to you over and over again, you're going to start to believe that people are assholes. Now, the challenge is to be somebody who's had a lot of experiences where people do treat you like crap or people do let you down, and to still have the courage to actually believe that it's okay to trust somebody. And that is really, really difficult. It's not easy to be in that position. So it's a journey, and it's something that takes time to kind of get accustomed to, because if you've been let down a lot, it's hard to put yourself in a position where you're kind of afraid of being let down again. So it's a challenge, but also the journey starts by just acknowledging that the perspective that people are more likely to let you down or more likely not to let you down, or whatever perspective you have, it's based on your experience, but it's not necessarily the reality. And that's a good starting point there. Untrapping says, I do find it really helpful as there aren't many like-minded people I know who are in the same situation and could understand and relate. Cool. Well, I'm very glad that you find it helpful. I'm very glad that these check-ins are useful. And we do them at the beginning of every stream. We do them 11 a.m. Pacific time, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. It's the beginning of every stream, the first hour. And Thursday is going to be a 2-hour one. So we're just going to do it for a bit longer and put a little bit more pressure on me to just keep talking for 2 hours. I imagine with streamers who are really big, with streamers who get like 1,000 viewers, just chatting for 2 hours is not hard because you just react to chat for 2 hours. But when chat is not like just constantly flowing, when there's not like hundreds of people just talking, that's where it gets challenging. So this is gonna be fun for me. Happy to see you streaming. I'm glad that you're happy. I am happy to be streaming. Haven't been feeling very good all lately. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope you're doing a little better now. Got around to shave my head nice and neat, but still gathering strength for a shower. Matt, we kind of look alike. I shaved that as well. Yeah, honestly, I'm super lazy when it comes to actually shaving my head too. Like, I should shave it more. Even right now, like, I can kind of see that I should shave it more because I can see the darker patches on the sides and not on the top so much. So I can sympathize there. But even if you can't gather the strength for a shower, try something like that's in between, right? So try just like go across the room to do something, like go look out the window or something like that. Just some small thing that's not necessarily I'm gonna get up and go have a shower, but if you get yourself some momentum, then you might be able to get to that point, right? /4D, welcome, hello, and welcome to the community. I appreciate you being here. I hope you're doing well. Feel free to tell us how you're really feeling today for Mindful Monday. How do you know when self-help reaching out is not enough and you need to get professional help? I would say, first of all, that's a really good question. I would say there is no hard and fast dividing line, but I think it's a thing where professional help is always uh, an option, right? There's nobody out there who quote unquote shouldn't get therapy. There's nobody out there where the right therapist wouldn't be a good idea. Now there are some there are therapists who are not right for a certain person. You know, there are certain times where a person going to a therapist is not necessarily the right option for them. But I don't think there's a hard line where you can say, okay, now you need therapy. I think that the way to look at it is, if you the less of a support network that you have, and the less of a group of people that you have in your life, or a sort of fallback group that you have that you can talk to. Maybe if you don't have like a significant other or a close friend that you can talk to, if you don't have somebody in your life that you can share your experiences with and just talk about what you're going through on a day-to-day basis, if you don't have that, that's going to make therapy more of a significant benefit for you, because it's going to give you the chance to just voice a lot of the stuff that you're naturally keeping held back because you don't have people to talk to about it. So I would say that somebody who has a lot of people to talk to, or who has a significant other, has somebody just that they can just like get stuff off their chest with, that person's going to have a slightly less of an immediate need for therapy. But really, at any point where you start to think, well, my life could be a little bit better than it is right now, or you start to think, I feel depressed, or I feel anxious about something, a therapist can help with that. So I don't think that there's a certain point where you should say, I'm not like bad enough for therapy, right? Because even somebody whose experience of life is relatively good can sometimes have an even better experience of life as a product of therapy. Let me just address chat here because I'm getting a little behind. Yeah, same. I just look like an old man when I don't shave too often, and true momentum's helpful. Cool. Yeah. One of my major hang-ups is being unable to make meaningful connections with other people. It definitely comes from teenage years of finding it easier to disassociate from others. Presenting vulnerability is basically impossible for me, so finding support networks is very hard. Yeah, that's tough. And I feel you there, because I've sort of struggled with the same type of thing, you know. So I think the issue there is like to gradually push your comfort threshold when it comes to vulnerability. So the things that are scary in terms of vulnerability, you just gradually boost your ability to do those things. Just small steps, that kind of thing. That's been useful for me, I think. When I was younger, I wasn't ready for therapy, the one-to-one kind, or the workload of it. Yeah, that's fair. I think with younger people, it's definitely harder. You need the right therapist. Nowadays, I might have therapy sessions rarely, or even two times a week. It depends. Yeah, that's great. Being adaptable like that is super important. Yeah. /40. Yeah, I'm just completely done. I just wish that I get... Oh, no, dude. No. I think that... So / I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but I think the way to look at it, right, is that there are a lot of things in life that you have control over, and there are a lot of things that you don't have control over. And I get it. There are a lot of areas where the things that you don't control can be extremely painful, and there are a lot of times where, you know, bad things happen to us through means that are outside of our control. But the way that you handle the stuff that is within your control is completely up to you, and you do have power and agency over a lot of things in your life, right? So the fact that you came to watch this stream is an example of you taking control in a way that hopefully slightly improves your experience of life, which is great. So it's definitely frustrating at times when you don't have power. I think we all get that. And to address your second point here, you don't get to choose if you want to get born, things like that. I think we all kind of feel where you're coming from in the frustration, and these are common things that people with depression experience. But I think that Herr Formio has a great point there, which is that life is definitely unfair a lot of the time. It's absolutely true. But you do have things, there are things within that you can find that are worth feeling positive about. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge not to give up on that idea. But I promise you, if you don't give up on that, you'll be happy that you didn't in future. Let me address Monobrow's point. The problem I have and the work I do, or rather did do, is that declaring you've sought professional help will reduce your chance of getting new jobs. It is always asked about prior to job offer. Yeah, that's unfair. I know I need help, can't get it from my existing circle, and can't get help professionally or I'll never get my income back, which I'm sure is a large part of my depression. Yeah, that is deeply unfair, and that is one of the aspects of our culture that needs to be changed. Now, there are two things that I would say in that department that are important with the situation that you have, right? Number one, I think it's important to really do your homework as to the specifics of what your circumstances would be if you did declare that you have sought professional help. Because you may be very correct that it would reduce your chances of getting new jobs. And you may be very correct that it might hurt your future income to some degree. However, it may not be substantial enough of a downside for it to actually justify not getting therapy. So you may be better off as a holistic perspective on your life if you were to be getting therapy and maybe making 20% less money than the other way around, right? So I think that's the first point, that you want to really make sure that you've done your homework on the specifics of how much of a change it's going to be, what the actual consequences would be, things like that. And then the second thing is that if somebody doesn't have access to mental health care, if somebody doesn't have access to a therapist, it's really important that that person takes maximum accountability for the things in their life that they control and does the things that can help them to improve their emotional experience of life without necessarily needing a therapist. So all the basic stuff, the stuff that is directly within your control, things like how much time you spend in front of a screen, or diet, exercise, like things like that, where it doesn't involve a therapist and it may not make an overnight change. But each of those things, each small thing that you can do that's within your control might have a 5% impact or a 2% impact. And that is going to improve over time. It's going to improve the emotional experience that you have. And I think that the less access somebody has to professional help, the more important it is that they understand that there are things that you can do even without access to therapy. And of course, you can share parts of your life with us, parts of your life with other people around you. Thank you for the follow, Jarrett's Terrain Minis. I'm not sure what that refers to, Jarrett's Terrain Minis. I don't know what that is, but thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Welcome to the community. Happy to have you here. I'm just going to call you Jarrett. Untrapping 12 says, I've started taking sertraline Zoloft since citalopram didn't go so well. Okay. Yeah. I think so. I'm Jarrett is your name. That's good. Okay, awesome. Hey Nick, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So to address Untrapping's point here. Oh wait, what the hell's going on with the music? Why is the music not on? Do we still have music? I'm not hearing anything. Oh no, it's back. Okay, cool. That's fine. It was just a weird song that had like silence at the beginning. Strange. Anyway, yeah, and I feel you there in this on trapping, in the sense that I'm on medication right now, and I think it's, in the US it's very expensive, number one, and it is it's weird to think about it in those terms, in the sense of, like, I don't want to be reliant on taking this long term. I think that like, it's natural to not necessarily want to be taking drugs your whole life. And I think that the resolution to the sort of query is to, I think, just accept that there's a lot of different influences going on, right? So if we think about the book that we've been reading, Lost Connections, right here, this book talks a lot about how there are so many different contributing factors to depression, anxiety, and whatever our emotional experience is in any given instance. And I think that the medication part of it, or the biological part of it, is one component, and it might mean that you need medication at certain times and not at other times, right? Because the influences are so significant. And I don't think that there are that many people who are in the category where they need medication for the rest of their life, but there are some, because we've got conditions out there that are not just depression or anxiety, but they are bipolar, PTSD, schizophrenia. You've got people who really biologically do need that medication. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it kind of comes back to that control thing, right? Like, the more control you're able to take over the things that are within your power to improve your quality of life, the less likely it is that you're going to need medication. But also, it's not just because you need medication now doesn't say anything about you as a person, and it doesn't mean that you're going to need medication forever. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a permanent thing. Let me go back to chat. I'm pretty sad I cannot use medication because it doesn't suit me medically. It's just difficult to fight the things inside my brain all natural. Yeah, it's always difficult, man. It's always difficult, but we're all here for you. Thanks for that response, Matt. You're right, and that's outside the long-term depression stuff. Yeah, that's good. Addiction issues, yeah, that's tough. That's really tricky. I feel I'm at the point I've tried everything and need medication, but know it will be the end of my career. Thanks anyway. Okay, well, well, hey, here's one perspective, right? Maybe a new career is not a bad thing. Maybe there's something else out there that you've always wanted to do, but you've never done it, and now this might be your chance. Who knows? Maybe that's the case. Hello, Chromaroth. I am happy to have you back. Welcome, welcome. I'm doing pretty well. I am actually, yeah, feeling very good today, I think. So I'm happy for that. I'm very grateful for that. Where are we? Anxiety is a big one for me. Without a way to alter my ability to relax, I don't sleep, and I'm always on edge. Yeah, it's anxiety is a really tough one. I think that the thing for me about anxiety is that it's always, and we're going to talk a little bit about this today in mental methods. Anxiety it's a fear of something, right? It's a fear of oh, someone's on YouTube. Hey, CD on YouTube. Yeah, you're only seeing mine. That's sorry, CD. That's because those people are commenting on Twitch. So you can see the chat that's popping up on screen. You can see your messages popping up on screen, and you can see everybody else's in the actual stream layout. So if you look on the right-hand side, like around here, whenever someone says something in chat, like there, yeah, it's popping up right now. So right there, see? Right there is where the chat is. And that is visible on Twitch and on YouTube. And if you're viewing on YouTube, which thank you, by the way, the Twitch chat is only going to be visible there. But you can hop on over to Twitch if you like, and everybody else is, or a lot of people are on Twitch right now. No problem. I'm happy to explain. Happy to. Let me just go back here. Cricket says if you don't want to, you don't have to. Yeah, absolutely. And for Cricket, it's worth it. Where are we? What do we have here? I was told that when I had bipolar diagnosis, I wouldn't outgrow it and would always need meds. I've been without meds for a few years now. I felt like I needed to face this head on. Okay. Yeah, and I think that the issue that we deal with is that the science is always evolving, right? So somebody who is told at age 18 that they'll always need meds, that might not be true in 20 years from now. Mr. Grapefruit is raiding with a party of 3. Thank you, Mr. Grapefruit. I appreciate that. Welcome to everybody who's part of that raiding party. Thank you guys for the raid. So Nick says if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. Yeah. I hope y'all get to that point that your life gets better physically and mentally. Do you mean physically? Like physically, or do you mean fiscally, like money? Because both is good, I guess, right? I know how hard that can be. No doubt. Fight your demons and you'll be victorious. If anyone wants to talk about anything, what they're going through, I'm always free to hear you out. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. I really appreciate you for being here. Appreciate that. That's why I smoked weed or drink, because it slows my mind enough to where I can relax. Otherwise, I'm not capable of relaxing my mind. I think you are capable of it. It's just you haven't found the right method yet. I tried one of those mind flex things where you relax your mind to move a ball. I couldn't move it because I couldn't slow down at all. I think that, like I say, I think that it's a question of you haven't found the methodology here. I don't fight my demons anymore. I've made friends out of them. That can work too. That can work too. We're going to talk about resistance in just a bit. So on YouTube, CD says, well, I'm kind of new to this channel, but can you talk about eating disorders? Can I talk about eating disorders? I don't have a lot of... First of all, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. I don't have a level of professional experience that allows me to comment like in some kind of informed way about eating disorders. All I know is that eating disorders are something that often emerges as a result of trauma and things that people are dealing with that are psychological in nature. That's what I've read. So I think that eating disorders are something that requires a professional to address directly. And I don't want to talk in a ton of detail, but if you have something that you're dealing with in that area, this channel will always be a place that will be accepting and supportive of whatever you're going through. But I definitely would recommend talking with someone who has professional experience dealing with eating disorders and things of that nature, because they are their own kind of special beast, I suppose, in some ways. Drinking or weed can't help you going forward. It will just slow you down, keep you in on that dark path, break free from that, because you can change your life without all that. Yeah, I mean, I think that eating disorder is a way to feel in control, just like self-harm. That's a really good perspective from Cricket there. Yeah, that's true. And I think that the same might be true of things like alcohol and weed, right? In that, or alcohol and drugs, in that they're a way to control our emotional state. And what's good about all this is all of this is tapping in directly to the type of thing we're going to be discussing in Mental Methods coming up in about 15 minutes. So this is great, guys. You're all bringing up stuff that's directly related to what we're going to be talking about shortly. So I'm excited for that. We're going to have a good conversation about resistance and acceptance. One of the, or two of the, I think, more important concepts in the mental health domain. Excuse me. So to give you guys a rundown of what we're going to do today, we've got Mental Methods coming up. Then I think we're going to read another chapter of Lost Connections, because we're quite close to the end here. We've got about something like 70 pages left out of this 270-page book, something like that. So Another chapter would be good. And then later on today, in the second half of the stream, after I've taken a bit of a lunch break, we are going to play some games. We're going to hang out and we're going to play some Spider-Man Miles Morales on PS5. We just finished Spider-Man Remastered last Monday, and we're going to play Miles Morales this time around. I'm excited for that. It's supposed to be a really fun game. The first game was great. The first Spider-Man game was great. So looking forward to that. So please do come back and hang out with us for that at about 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's going to be, I think, 11 p.m. UTC, something like that. Keep that positivity, Matt. Love you, fella. Thank you, buddy. Right back at you. Appreciate it. So yeah, we're gonna play some games this afternoon. And I've been splitting up the stream lately into two parts where, you know, we sort of take a break and then come back after to play some games. But when I get to my new place, when I get to my new house, and I you know, I have a little bit of a better stream set up, or the room is a little bit cooler, not so warm later in the day, things like that. I'm hoping that I'm just going to be able to go straight through again. It does help me go forward. It quiets down the mental static and voices, and I can focus better and see things way more clearer. I can get to places that I normally can't focus on. That's a tricky one, I think, because ultimately, it's I think what's happening there is it's self-medication in the sense that alcohol and drugs can take the place of medications that are doing a similar thing, but without the damage, without the side effects of damage. Hey Heiser, welcome. How did The Last of Us runs? I honestly wrapped it up pretty much just right after you left, because it was oh geez, that's loud. Someone on a loud motorcycle right outside my house. Yeah, I wrapped it up right after you finished. Two runs was enough. We're gonna come back to that soon, but I gotta not die on that first fight. That was crazy. Where are we? Self-medicating and drinking is a bridge, and it's a bridge to nowhere. Sure, sometimes we just need to make it through the day, and smoking pot and getting high helps you this. But you have to ask yourself, where is it leading you towards? Interesting, yeah. I used to be a burner because the pain gave my mind something else to focus on other than the emotional pain. Yeah, self-harm is not something I have a lot of experience with either, but it's a difficult subject. Let me address CD in the chat here on YouTube. Who says, how do you deal with social anxiety by so many holiday parties? Wow, yeah. Social anxiety is a tough one. I've struggled with that a lot. I think the first thing is just to recognize that you don't have to go to holiday parties. Like, if you have social anxiety about parties, like it is not mandatory that you go. And people might try to make you feel bad about not going, but like, you definitely don't have to go. See you later, Herr Mayo. Take care, man. Take care, my friend. Are you going to wake up one day and not have to rely on getting high to feel good and live a fulfilling life? Yeah, I mean, honestly, these questions about drugs and alcohol, like, they're a little bit outside of my realm as well, in that I have almost no experience with drugs. I've smoked weed a few times, but outside of that, nothing. And I haven't drunk alcohol in several years. But I do remember that when I did drink, there were times where I would drink because it made me feel better. And there were times when I would drink because it would allow me to overcome my social anxiety. So it's I'm certainly familiar with that kind of aspect of it. So if you choose to do those things, start building a bridge elsewhere and reach out for help. Therapy. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Okay, see, with me, I put no value on my existence, never have. Okay, so that right there is the source of a lot of the struggles that you're having. Right there. That idea of putting no value on your existence. Because that's always going to lock you in this mentality that you're talking about here, where you're constantly just trying to influence your immediate emotional state using self-medication, because there's no long-term, like, there's nothing to work towards as a meaning for, like, what you're trying to generate out of your life, right? And it's hard to get to the point where you shift that perspective or invert that perspective and say, like, my life means something. I'm going to commit to the idea that my life is meaningful, because a lot of stuff around you in the culture tells you it's not. A lot of stuff around you tells you your life is not meaningful. You're pathetic. You're lame. Like, whatever. I shouldn't use the word lame. It's ableist, but you're, like, worthless or whatever. A lot of stuff tells you that, but to the people around you, your existence has value. And it may not feel that way, but it's true. Because it's true for me. Like, I certainly value you here. Like, I certainly there is value in your existence, because I value everybody that comes into this stream for the connection that I'm getting with all of you guys from talking about this stuff. And so other people value your existence. And the first step along the road to not needing to continually have these short-term fixes is for you to value your existence highly. You know, for you to say, like, it matters that I'm here, that I'm, you know, sticking around. And I think ultimately that some part of you does value your existence. It's just hard to admit that. I'm not alive for myself. It's because others want me to. So I figure either I'm semi-immortal or my purpose is greater than death. That feels like two extremes. That feels like I'm either invincible or I have some kind of purpose. Like, can't it be true that you just happen to get lucky in a certain situation, and that's something that you should be grateful for, or that you can be grateful for? I don't want to use the word should, but can't that be true? Is that not an option? So I just don't worry about my death, so I make use of my inability to die to help others who suffer. Well, that's fantastic, right? And I can tell you right there, right? The fact that you are doing positive things for other people, that means your existence has value. Period. That means your existence has a ton of value. So that perspective of not placing value on it, for everybody else, like, it's not the same, you know? My mom tried to do a home pre-exit on me. I survived AIDS, drowning, and choking 3 times. Well, that might be luck. It doesn't mean you're invincible, but we're all very grateful that you're here. I can tell you that. Your existence has value. Your existence has meaning. Let me address CD on YouTube as well, who says, oh, SIDS. Okay, I see. Are you like a therapist or something, or you just make mental health videos? Excuse me. I'm not a therapist. I don't have qualifications in that area. I am a professional poker player, and I've done a lot of working with other poker players, coaching other poker players, that has taught me a lot about psychology and has taught me a lot about certain concepts. And I'm here to try to help people, to try to be supportive to people, to try to provide a platform for people to discuss whatever's going on in their lives. And I'm definitely not a professional, and if people want professional help, they should go elsewhere. But I am trying to create a community based on us all being willing to help each other and discuss what we're going through, you know? So as far as me specifically, I am just a guy who hopefully has some interesting perspectives to offer based on my experience with depression and anxiety. Wigan944, hello. Welcome. Happy to have you with us. on this Monday morning. Well, it's almost not the morning anymore. It's 11:57 a.m. here in beautiful Las Vegas. It is it's very sunny outside, as you can tell. Beautiful blue sky, but it's very cold. What temperature is it? It's 52 Fahrenheit right now. So it's not that cold, actually. That's very nice of you. Thank you so much for taking your time and helping people. Thank you, CD. I am grateful that you're here, and I'm glad that you like the vibe of the channel. I'm glad that you're appreciative of what we're doing here. But I don't think of it just as something that I'm doing. I think of it as something that we're doing, because I'm not the one who's I'm not the entirety of this community. I'm maybe leading it or building it, but you guys are contributing to it. You guys are making this community what it is. So I'm very grateful for all of you, or towards all of you for all of that. So we're going to take a quick break right now because it's 11:58. We're going to take a very quick break, and I'm going to come back in a moment, and we're going to start off episode number 3 of Mental Methods. We're going to talk about resistance and acceptance. So stick with me, guys. I will be back in just a moment, and we will continue. All right, guys, we are back, and this is episode number 3 of Mental Methods. So welcome, everybody. I appreciate you guys for being here with me. And today, the topic is going to be resistance and acceptance. So this is something that I have put a reasonable amount of time and energy into thinking about. It's a concept that I think have become much more familiar with over the past few years than I ever have been before, or ever thought that I would be, simply because it's such a relevant concept for people who are involved in an industry like I am, which is as a professional poker player, where you are so frequently exposed to things that are completely beyond your control, right? So in poker, we're obviously playing a skill game, but we're essentially gambling for a living. And in that sense, it exposes you to the need to accept certain circumstances on a level way beyond how most people would usually sort of be exposed to certain things. You have to really develop a very deep relationship between, or a very deep understanding of the things you control versus the things that you don't. I'm just going to quickly transform my webcam here, or flip it horizontally. There we go. That's a little better. Now it actually looks like I'm looking at the screen here, or at least it looks better that way, I think. Anyway, so resistance and acceptance is the topic. And for today, we're going to start out by pretty much doing the same thing that we usually do, which is to define our terms here. We're going to define our terminologies that we're actually going to be using throughout this session. So firstly, resistance. Well, resistance is primarily defined, or can be defined, as the desire for the existing reality or situation to be different. So in this particular context, when it comes to mental health, we're talking about it in the sense that if we want things to be different to what they currently are, if we want things to change, if we want our circumstance to be different from what it is right now, then that is resistance in some degree. Secondly, we could also define it as an active effort to change that existing reality or situation. So if we are doing things that are designed to change our situation, to change our environment, to change the reality, then that is in itself an act of resistance as well, in the sense that we are resisting the environment strongly enough that we are now seeking to actively change it. And thirdly, resistance can be defined as a state of non-acceptance. So you can, to some degree, define these things in terms of their opposites, right? So we try not to do that in language. It's not the best thing to define something in terms of its opposite, because it becomes hard to understand what you're actually talking about. But in general terms, resistance is the opposite of acceptance, and acceptance is the opposite of resistance. You can see here that acceptance is also, you could also possibly define that as a state of non-resistance. So in this case, acceptance, on the other hand, is going to be the abandonment of any desire for the existing reality or situation to be different. That's going to mean a passive effort to respond to circumstances as opposed to changing them. Now, that passive effort can come in many forms. It can come in the form of just doing nothing in response to a certain thing. It can come in the form of maybe a more active type of acceptance, in the shape of something that might involve meditation, something that might involve doing a specific thing to try to condition yourself to better accept what's going on around you. I'm just going to get rid of this little thing in the corner there. There we go. That looks a bit better, right? So anything that is designed to condition you to better accept what's going on around you, better deal with, or maybe internalize, surrender to use some of the terminology from episode number 1, the circumstances around you. So this is the framework that we're operating with here when it comes to how these two terms are defined. And of course, they exist pretty much as opposites. There's a little bit of crossover between them in some instances, but really it's very hard to be exhibiting both of these things at the same time. And it's much more a question of exhibiting one or the other in most cases. So these are the terminologies that we're working with here, and we're going to continue with these definitions moving forward. So the question is, why do these terms matter in a mental health context? Well, let's talk about it. 1 second. I got to stay hydrated, guys. I got to always stay hydrated. Well, first of all, we're in mental health terms, we're always trying as human beings to improve our emotional experience of life. We're always trying to do that. We're always doing something that is going to essentially condition us in a certain way to, well, sorry, let me go back. We're always trying to improve our emotional experience through a lens of just wanting life to be better, right? we seek out things that make us feel good physically or emotionally. We seek out things that produce a feeling of comfort and security and things like that. And so our evolutionary conditioning is telling us to avoid painful situations so that we can survive. And that in itself is causing us to seek out comfort. So comfort on an evolutionary level is, I am safe, right? I am not in any danger right now. If we are feeling that kind of comfort, then we are we're getting that recognition of like, oh, my survival is not threatened right now. And that's why on a certain level, comfort is so powerful. It's such a powerful experience. But what also happens is when something becomes uncomfortable, we get this message, we get this physical message that our bodies give us that says, this is bad, we need to avoid this, because uncomfortable things, painful things, can be dangerous. And when something is dangerous, it might impact our chances of survival. The species might not survive if we do too many dangerous things, right? So our evolutionary conditioning is telling us, avoid pain and seek out comfort and pleasure. And so we naturally have a resistance to any exposure to pain or discomfort. We naturally are conditioned to want things that feel good. And that's a bit of an issue in some ways, because now in the modern world, where our experience of pleasure in some way, physical, emotional, is very wrapped up in a lot of cultural stimuli, it now becomes very complex to figure out where a lot of these influences are coming from, right? Because we're not just talking anymore about the basics of survival. We're not just talking anymore about things like food, water, shelter, sex, stuff like that. We're talking about things that are much more sort of high level. We talk about like the high level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talk about like fulfillment, and we talk about, you know, self-actualization and things like this, to the point where our basic focus on physical and emotional pleasure and comfort as opposed to pain kind of gets obscured a little bit. And so we want to think about resistance and acceptance as concepts that originate from this evolutionary conditioning. They kind of originate from our desire to not experience pain, our innate resistance to pain, and our innate desire to accept situations that basically cause us to feel good, right? So these matter a lot for mental health, because our mental health is really all about our emotional experience of life. It's about our emotional framework and emotional landscape of our lives. So what is the essential experience of someone who is going through depression? Well, when we have depression, this depression causes us to feel a deep kind of emotional pain, which is something that we usually avoid. And once we experience this kind of pain, once we have experienced depression on some level, we understand how bad that depression feels. So we actually avoid that depression more intensely. We start to fear it. We start to be actively averse to it. We start to think, this is what depression feels like, and it feels so bad that I don't want this to happen. I don't want depression to overcome me in some capacity. However, what this does is it creates a habit of intensely resisting certain emotions. So those negative emotions, those painful emotions that come with depression, we start to have a real aversion to those emotions. We start to think in terms of, I don't want to do something that causes me to feel this way. Or if we're in the middle of feeling that way, we start to think, I have to do something that causes me to not feel this way. I have to change the way I feel. And then we start to think, I don't want to feel depression again. Once we feel better, we start to think, I don't want to feel depression again, because I know how uncomfortable it is to feel those things. So we've experienced that pain to some degree, and then that experience, that conditioning, then leads us to say, I don't want this to happen again. I don't want this to come back in here to me. Hello, LV. Welcome. Happy to have you with us for episode number 3 of Mental Methods. So our resistance towards these painful emotions when we experience depression is actually amplifying those emotions. The resistance causes us to be hyper aware of when we're feeling good or when we're feeling bad. And so our desire to feel good becomes so strong that it actually makes us feel worse, because we become so aware of how not good we're feeling. If you can ever think back to a time when you weren't really feeling very good, but you weren't really paying much attention to how you were feeling because you were distracted by it, that's a lot more easily palatable than, let's say, feeling really bad and being very focused on how bad you feel, right? So this resistance that we have towards painful emotions causes us to focus on them more. It causes us to amplify those emotions, and it actually makes depression worse. Now, the answer here isn't to just not focus on your emotions. I'm not saying that. But this is a pattern that it's very easy to get into when you have depression. Now, on the other side of the coin, we have the anxiety experience. And the anxiety experience is also largely born out of resistance. But it's a resistance to external factors instead of internal emotions or feelings. Because when we're anxious about something, it's because we are fearful of a certain outcome or a certain circumstance. It could be that we're afraid of experiencing a certain emotion that might come up if that circumstance were to occur. But a lot of the time, we don't even know exactly what it is we're actually afraid of. So if you are somebody with anxiety, anxiety is something that I struggle with, then you might be able to point to instances where you've had an experience where you were really anxious about something, and you were kind of like afraid of it in some way, or you were anxious to manage a certain situation to try to generate a certain outcome, but you weren't actually sure why. I've had that before. I've had like times where I've had real I wouldn't say necessarily panic attacks, but I've had like real profound anxiety about a certain situation, even at a time when I'm like, why am I anxious about this? This doesn't matter at all. And so sometimes it can be a situation that is not even particularly consequential, and you can't really nail down exactly what it is that you're afraid of. However, what's going on is that anxiety is created by a profound fear of, and therefore a resistance towards, an imagined idea of what the future is going to be. So when we have an idea in mind of how a situation is potentially going to turn out, we become anxious about that, because that situation, that potential future, if it were to happen, it would cause us to experience a lot of emotions that were very difficult for us, let's say. And so the fear of that future starts to drive our thoughts, starts to drive our thought processes in a lot of instances. So this is the nature of how resistance starts to create anxiety. So let me explain a little bit about acceptance and whether or not that's actually the answer. Well, it's not quite as simple as that. It's not quite as simple as there being a specific answer that we can point to, because acceptance, or non-resistance, if you want to call it that, can be both a good and a bad thing, in that it can cause us to feel a profound sense of relief. So it can cause us to feel a profound sense of like, okay, I'm just accepting this. Like, it is what it is. I don't have to try to change it. Like, I'm just accepting it. Like, we can feel good in that sense. Or we can feel powerless. You know, we can also feel this sense of, I wish that I could control things. I wish that I could change a certain circumstance, but I don't have the power to do that. So acceptance can cause us to feel that way. And we can, if we look back to Mental Methods number 1 from a couple weeks ago, that episode talked about ownership and surrender. And these concepts are very similar in that ownership is the act of assuming responsibility for how we behave or how we handle a certain circumstance. And surrender is the act of basically assigning responsibility to the outside world and saying, I'm not responsible for this. I am going to surrender and accept what's going on. So there's a lot of overlap between these two concepts, but acceptance and surrender are a little bit different in that acceptance is almost an active process, or more of an active process than surrender. Surrender is just dropping the resistance, dropping the desire to take ownership. Acceptance is welcoming a certain circumstance because we recognize that resisting it is actively going to potentially create harmful thoughts and feelings for ourselves. And then on the bottom line really here is that we need to be adaptable enough, we need to be psychologically adaptable enough to apply acceptance in the situations where it's a benefit, but not in the situations where it's to our detriment. We need to be malleable. We need to have that kind of psychological flexibility to allow ourselves to do this, right? And that's a real challenge. It's really hard to do these things. It is not easy, to put ourselves in this kind of in this position. So realistically, the question is, how do we understand when acceptance is going to be harmful, and how do we understand when acceptance is actually going to be a benefit? And that takes a long time. It's a long process. But let's talk a little bit about where that resistance comes from as a sort of pathway towards hopefully reducing it. Let me get some water first. So there's 3 sort of different levels on which we can analyze this. We can look at resistance as a factor, or resistance to negative emotions, basically. When we're talking about resistance, we're talking about a resistance to an experience that we think is going to create a negative emotion, or create some kind of negative feeling, some kind of negative experience of life, something like that. Our resistance comes from 3 things. It starts on the cultural level. It starts in our cultural environment. And our environment tells us your experience of life is lacking. Your experience of life is less than it could be. There is something missing from your life, and you need to improve your life. And a lot of that messaging that comes out of our culture is grounded in advertising. A lot of it is grounded in our culture's desire to get us to buy things as a product of our desire to improve our life, and things like that. So our experience of life is lacking as a byproduct of our, let me rephrase. If we feel like our experience of life is lacking, it is partially as a byproduct of our overall kind of bombardment, our being bombarded with these messages that say your experience of life is lacking. And then the external messaging that we get on top of that, outside of just the message in our culture, but the messaging that we get from our interactions with the people around us, is largely a question of seeing, like we mostly see the positive things that they experience because that's what they share with us, and we don't see the negative things. We don't see the things that are, I guess, we don't see their pain. We don't see their discomfort, their shame, and all these things. We don't see that in our culture. And we don't see that in the people that we interact with, because largely the majority of the people that we interact with aren't sharing that stuff with us. We don't talk to our work colleagues about the negative experiences they've had on a day-to-day basis. We don't talk to our necessarily our acquaintances or the people that we hang out with outside of work. We don't always talk to them about the things that are going on that are bad in our lives. So the external messaging is reinforcing the idea that other people are experiencing only positive emotions, right? And then our internal self-talk becomes a product of that, where we start to ask ourselves, why is my emotional experience of life so lacking in comparison to everyone else? What's wrong with me? And we start to resist these potentially negative experiences. We start to resist certain things that might actually be very natural parts of life, but we resist them because we think that if we're having some kind of negative experience, then that means there's something wrong with us, right? That negative experience is something that we should look at as a reflection on our qualities as a human being. And that's problematic. That's really problematic, because the effect of that is very profound. And I want to show you the slide that I have here as an example of what that does in our culture. This is how our culture works, guys. This is, if you live in a Western country, this is what happens. So you can draw the starting point here basically anywhere, because it's really it's a cycle that doesn't have a distinct beginning. But let's start with people don't share their negative emotions and experiences. So people clam up, people don't talk with others about maybe what might be going on for them in their lives on a negative side. They don't share when they're grieving or when they are in pain or discomfort, something like that. And then those people around them begin to believe, I guess, that the reason they're not sharing these things is because their lives are actually great. Their lives are doing really well. And that's just how their life is right now. And so people then start to wonder, why isn't my life as great as this other person's? People then start to think, well, everybody else around me has a great life. Everybody else around me is doing great. Everybody else around me is experiencing all these positive emotions on a day-to-day basis. But why aren't I getting that? Why aren't I getting this same level of positive emotional experience? And as a result of that, people then start to believe that something is wrong with them, and that their negative emotions are all their own fault. And then that resistance really starts to build up, right? Because anytime we feel like our negative emotion is our own fault, or it's a reflection on us as a person, we start to feel like there's something wrong with us as a person. And then we start to feel a sense of shame. And that sense of shame causes us to withdraw from connecting with other people. And when we do withdraw, it becomes a problem, because we then don't share our negative emotions and experiences. And the cycle is then reinforced. So when we don't share, we're contributing to this cycle, but at the same time, we're also behaving very naturally according to what is logical for us, in that if we feel shame about a certain negative emotion or a certain experience that we have, or a certain feeling that we have about life, then of course it makes sense that we would withdraw from connecting with others. Of course it makes sense that we would do that, right? And thus this cycle is perpetuated. And so this is how Western culture works these days. This is how it operates. This is how it behaves on a level where we see these small personal interactions manifesting out into the world, out into our culture. And this becomes really toxic because it convinces everybody that negative emotions are something to be ashamed of, and they are something that they are your responsibility and they are your fault, and depression is because you didn't do something that you should have done, and all sorts of things like that. So this is how our culture works, and this is why we need to change it as a collective. So how do we fix this? How do we get better? Well, this is one of the areas where resistance is actively helpful, because this is one of the areas where resisting a cultural narrative is important. This is one of the areas where, when we as an individual refuse to take part in what happens in our culture, when we decide to make a different choice, when we choose to act differently, we're breaking down that cultural narrative that is in existence, and we're breaking down the influences that are causing other people to feel the same way that we do. So by resisting these narratives and replacing them with new ones, which is the only way that we can actually break these down permanently, we create an environment where nobody has to be resistant to negative emotions, and it becomes a whole lot easier to accept the emotional landscape of our lives, which allows everybody to feel better on average. It allows everybody to experience life in a deeper way, because we're no longer forced to feel some kind of shame over the negative emotions that we experience. However, these narratives, a new narrative for our culture, for our society, these things require time and effort. These things require a lot of energy to be put into making change. And this is one of the areas where resistance matters. This is one of the areas where resistance is a very powerful thing, because we don't necessarily, we don't see a large scale change unless a lot of people take part in making it happen. So this is an important long-term effort for us as a society. So how do we build that new narrative, first of all? Well, our new narrative about what our lives are, or what our lives, quote unquote, should be, needs to be realistic. It needs to be something that is science-based, with an understanding of our evolutionary biology. It needs to be something that is grounded in embracing the parts of ourselves that are unchangeable, because they are, inherent to our nature scientifically. And it also needs to recognize that we're complex creatures who experience many things. We need to have a sense of humility as to the fact that we are still learning about what exactly the human experience is, and how our experience changes with the evolution of our culture, how our experience changes as our technologies evolve, and all sorts of things. And there's beef. Cat alert emote in chat. At a basic level, it needs to embrace one reality, which is that a life without painful emotional experiences is literally biologically impossible. So a life without these kinds of emotional ups and downs is not something that a human being can experience, because our emotional ups and downs are hardwired into us. They are signals about our environment. They are signals that tell us when we're not getting something that we need, or when we are not having our needs met. And reducing our emotional experience of life to only positive emotions would mean that we had all of our needs met at all times. And that is a great thing to shoot towards in the long term, in the sense that we're always looking to improve our emotional experience of life. We're always looking to make sure all of our needs are met as much as possible. But we can't afford to get to a point where we feel like if we're not having all of our needs met at any given point, then that's our fault. And that negative emotion that might come with that is some failure on our part, because it's biologically programmed into us that we would experience these negative emotions as an indicator that something is missing for us. And this is something that this book, Lost Connections, has taught me a lot about, which is really interesting. So how do we actually learn this on an individual level? Well, there's three kind of tiers here, I think, that are in operation. We have perspective. So we have the macro level, like, approach to the world that we have, which is to reinforce our acceptance of negative experiences by reflecting on the meaning of these experiences and seeking out self-understanding. So that's the macro level perspective here. The meso level, which is the sort of middle level, is our behavior, which is to reduce our resistance to negative experiences by actively seeking out things slightly outside of our comfort zone. So that's not necessarily cat alert again. That's not necessarily doing things that are deeply uncomfortable, but just slightly pushing our comfort zone continually over time. So just slightly increasing it. Just kind of like if you go to the gym and you're slightly increasing the amount of weight you can lift each time. That slight seeking out of discomfort helps to reduce our resistance to these negative experiences. And that over time is going to make it easier to deal with the times where we actually do feel deep emotional pain. Oh wow, more cat alert. They're just charging backwards and forwards right now, like they're going crazy. And finally, the micro level is communication. It's how we talk with others. It's how we engage with the world around us. There they go again. I'm not going to spam the cat alert too much. And because by doing this, by communicating with others openly and honestly, we contribute to breaking the cycle of shame that's associated with negative experiences and emotions, because we encourage others to feel like it's okay that they're going through something that is not a positive emotional experience. It's okay that that's happening to them. And we encourage others not to feel some sense of shame attached to that. When we reduce that sense of shame that they might feel, we make it easier and easier for them to continue being willing to connect with more people and for everybody to share what their experience is, so that we can start to break down this this narrative that exists that's so damaging in our culture. So that's how we can hopefully implement this in our own day-to-day. So that's about it for today, guys. In terms of slides, I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have them. I know we went a little bit shorter this time than we have in previous episodes, but I hope those perspectives were useful. This is something that poker has taught me a lot of. It's taught me a lot about where resistance comes from. It's taught me a lot about accepting a certain outcome, accepting a certain reality, not wishing it was different, things like that. So I hope this was useful for you guys. How many people do we have in chat? We got 10 people. Nice. Okay. So we had some ups and downs during that. I kept an eye on the view account, and it was like going up and down a little bit, but you know what? Maybe I'm just going to keep the view account visible. We'll see. So yeah, I think the perspective that poker's taught me in this regard is really, really valuable. And I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts, anything that you wanted to add here. In fact, you know what we can do is we'll go back to just chatting. Sorry about only managed to catch the end. Great insightful stuff. Thank you, Mr. Grapefruit. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for you being here. Or maybe I should say grateful. That's terrible. That's not funny. I only said that because grapefruit kind of sounds like grateful. I kind of doesn't, but never mind. Very useful information. Thanks. No worries. I'm glad to be offering useful info. FTB. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to do one more chapter of Lost Connections, if nobody has any questions. But if questions do come up about some of this resistance acceptance stuff, then feel free to throw them out there, guys. In the meantime, let's read some book. I've had the distinct impression. This is cricket. I've had the distinct impression since I was about 20 that when I started talking to people about shit that has happened to me, they get really, really, really uncomfortable. Is that just me? I don't think it's just you. I think it's because of the stigma that exists, right? In that when I think number one, it's because like you've been through a lot of trauma, and you've also been around a lot of people who are just assholes, and I think they in particular maybe don't recognize the value of connecting with other people in that kind of emotional level, right? And I think that if we think about that cycle, right, the cycle that I pointed out there, those people are participating in perpetuating that because they are actively discouraging you from sharing parts of yourself by reacting in a way that isn't, understanding and accepting and things like that of when you share some of the stuff that you've been through. But I think if you look at other communities outside of the people that you've been around, because I know you've been in some communities that, looking back, I don't think you're the biggest fan of. It might be the case that communities that you could be in now, for example, the community on this channel, I think would be a lot more open and accepting and would not cause you to feel that level of shame about expressing yourself. Theater people, yeah. I mean, you know how I feel about the theater industry and about the people that you've been in contact with during your time in the theater industry. So the less said about that, the better. But I don't think those people have an exceptional handle on how to respond in a healthy way when someone tells you that they've been through something really difficult in their life. Put it that way. I think that's how I would describe that. So let's do another chapter of Lost Connections. All right, where are we at? So last time we talked about, I think it was reconnection number 2, I think it was. Oh, whoops. Reconnection 2 was social prescribing. Yeah, we talked about social prescribing. And now reconnection 3 is the reconnection to meaningful work. So let's talk about this. Chapter 18, Reconnection 3 to Meaningful Work. Oops, I forgot I haven't changed the stream title yet, so let me do that. Mindful Monday. Lost Connections by Johann Hari. Read along. There we go. All right, nice. So, Chapter 18, Reconnection 3 to Meaningful Work. Whenever I became optimistic about the chances of this reconnection spreading beyond isolated points of light like Cotti in Berlin or the Bromley by Bow Clinic in East London, I came back to a huge obstacle, and for a long time I couldn't see how we could get beyond it. We spend most of our waking lives working, and 87% of us feel either disengaged or enraged by our jobs. You are twice as likely to hate your job as love it. And once you factor in emails, those work hours are spreading over more and more of our lives, 50, 60 hours a week. This isn't a molehill, it's the mountain at the center of almost all our lives. This is where our time goes and our lives go. So yes, you can tell people to try alternatives, to reach out, but when exactly are they meant to do it? In the 4 hours when they collapse onto the sofa and try to engage with their kids before they clamber into bed before it starts all over again? But that's not the obstacle I was thinking of. The obstacle is that meaningless work has to be done. It's not like some of the other causes of depression and anxiety I've been talking about, like childhood trauma or extreme materialism, which are unnecessary malfunctions in the wider system. Work is essential. I thought about all the jobs all my relatives have done. My maternal grandmother cleaned toilets. My maternal grandfather worked on the docks. My paternal grandparents were farmers. My dad was a bus driver. My mother worked in a shelter for victims of domestic violence. My sister is a nurse. My brother orders stock for a supermarket. All of these jobs are necessary. If they stopped being done, then key parts of our society would cease to function. And if that work, being bossed around, made to do it, being disciplined by the market into doing stuff that's tedious but necessary, is essential, then even if it causes depression and anxiety, it must continue. It felt like a necessary trap. On an individual level, a few of us might escape. If you can move to a job where you are controlled less and have more autonomy, or are doing something you believe matters, do it. Your anxiety and depression levels will likely dip. But in a landscape where only 13% of people have jobs they find meaningful, that advice seems almost cruel. Most of us aren't, in this environment as it stands today, going to get to work that we find personally meaningful. As I type this, I am picturing one person I know and love who is a single mother working a low-paid job she hates in order to keep her 3 kids in their apartment. Telling her she needs a more fulfilling job when she's battling to keep a job at all would be both mean and meaningless. I began to think about this obstacle differently and to see a way beyond it only when I went to a rather prosaic place. It is a small store in Baltimore that sells and repairs bikes. They told me a story, and that story opened me up to a much wider debate and to the evidence that suggests we can infuse our work with greater meaning and make it radically less depressing, not just for a few privileged individuals, but for the whole society. The day that Meredith Mitchell handed in her resignation, she wondered if she was doing something crazy. She worked at the fundraising arm of a not-for-profit campaign group in Maryland. It was a typical office job. She was given assignments with a deadline, and her role was to keep her head down and do what she was told. Sometimes she would have ideas about how they could do things better. If she tried to put them forward, she was told to get on with what she'd been assigned. She had a boss who seemed like a nice person, but she was volatile, and Meredith never really knew how to read her moods. Meredith knew that in the abstract her work was probably doing some good, but she never felt any connection to it. It felt like a karaoke life. Her job was to sing along to a song sheet written by somebody else. It wasn't a life where she would ever get to write her own song. At the age of 24, she could see this stretching out before her for the next 40 years. Around this time, Meredith started to feel a pervasive sense of anxiety she couldn't quite understand. On Sunday nights, she'd feel her heart pounding in her chest, and a sense of dread about the week to come. Before long, she found she couldn't sleep during the week either. She kept waking up feeling cripplingly nervous, but she didn't know why. Yet when she told her boss she was quitting, she wasn't at all sure she was doing the right thing. She had grown up in a politically conservative family, and what she was about to embark on seemed radical and strange to them, and if she was honest, to herself. Meredith's husband, Josh, had a plan. He had started working in bike stores when he was 16 years old, and he'd been riding bikes as a hobby for years before that. He loved the 20-inch trick bikes on which you could whir around the city and carry out stunts off the side of sloped buildings. But working in bike stores, he learned, is a really hard way to make a living. It's low-wage work. You don't get a job contract or sick pay or vacations. It can be monotonous at times, and you're pervasively insecure. You can't plan for anything, and there's no path up. You're basically stuck on the bottom rung. If you ever wanted a raise or a day off or to stay home when you were ill, you had to beg the boss. Josh had been working for a few years in a typical bike store in the city. The owner wasn't, on a personal level, a bad guy, but life working in his bike store was, for all these reasons, pretty miserable. You could bear it as a teenager, but as you got into your 20s and started to think about the future, you found there was just a big hole ahead of you. At first, Josh's solution was to try something that has largely faded from life in the United States. He approached his colleagues, there were 10 people working in the store, and asked them if they would consider, together, setting up a labor union to formally demand better conditions. It took some time to persuade people, but Josh is an enthusiastic guy, and everyone who worked there agreed to sign on. They drew up a list of pretty basic demands that they felt would make their lives better. They wanted written contracts, they wanted pay raises for 2 of the workers to bring them up to the level of everyone else, and they wanted annual meetings to discuss salaries. It wasn't much, but it would, they felt, make them less anxious and more secure. But the list of demands was, in truth, more than that. It was a way of saying, we're not just cogs in a machine, like the screws we put into the bikes when we fix them. We're people with needs. We're partners, and we deserve respect. He didn't quite think of it this way then, but it was about restoring dignity, Josh told me later, to working class people who were being told that they were, basically, not worth much, and could be tossed aside at any time. Josh felt they were in a strong position though, because he knew the business couldn't function without them. When he was presented with the demands, Josh's boss looked really surprised, but he said he'd think about it. A few days later, he employed a tough labor-busting lawyer, and a long process of trying to deny them the right to organize began. It dragged on for months, and the whole US legal system is designed to make it hard to organize a union and easy to break one up. The workers couldn't afford any kind of lawyer. His boss started to bring in new workers to undermine the unionized ones. Josh knew that technically it would be illegal for his boss to fire him or the other workers, but both sides knew the workers couldn't afford a long legal fight to assert that right. That's when Josh had an idea. He knew how bike shops were run. The workers knew how it operated because they literally did almost all the work. He thought, we could do this. We could run a store like this ourselves without the boss. If this was a conventional American story, Josh would now break away and set up his own business and rise to become the Jeff Bezos of bikes, or at least end up owning his own beach house on the Jersey Shore. But Josh didn't want to become the guy who orders everyone else around. In his years working in bike shops, he had noticed some things. The boss is isolated. Even when he's a nice guy, he's pushed into this weird position, controlling other people, which makes it hard for him to connect in ordinary ways. And this system of having one guy at the top giving orders seemed to Josh to be quite inefficient. The guys working on the shop floor had loads of good ideas about how to make the business better. They could see things the boss couldn't see, but it made no difference. Their thoughts were irrelevant, and that actually harmed, Josh suspected, the business itself. This is really interesting right now, guys, because this is tapping into a lot of stuff that I've been thinking about for a long time. No, what Josh wanted was to be a part of a business that ran on a different American ideal, democracy. He read up on the history of something called cooperatives. It turns out the way of working that we all take for granted now, a corporation that's run like an army, with one person at the top giving orders to the troops below, who have no say, is actually quite recent. It was only in the late 19th century that it became standard for human beings to work this way. When the boss-run corporation first started to take over, it was resisted intensely. Lots of people pointed out that it would create a system of wage slavery in which people would be controlled all the time and would end up feeling miserable. Some of them, Josh learned, had proposed organizing our work on totally different principles. They were called democratic cooperatives, and Josh learned that some had been really successful. So Josh talked with some of his close friends, people he had worked alongside for a long time, and with his wife, Meredith, about an idea. Let's run our own bike store and do it as a cooperative. That means we'll share the work and we'll share the profits. We'll make the decisions democratically. We won't have a boss because we'll all be the boss. We're going to work hard, but we'll work differently, and it might just make us feel better. Meredith thought it sounded appealing, but as she quit her old job, she kept wondering, was it realistic? How would it work? As I approached Baltimore Bicycle Works on its corner in the downtown of the city, it looked like any other bike store. On the ground floor, there are bright bikes and accessories all around on a cement floor, and there's a cash register where Meredith was working when I arrived. When she took me upstairs, I saw there was a row of bikes lifted up as if on pulleys, and guys were standing next to them, looking as though they were performing some kind of primitive surgery. The bikes were partly dismantled, and they were being altered with screwdrivers and some tool I'd never seen before. Images of George Clooney repairing somebody's heart on ER flickered through my mind. Alex Tiku, a guy in his late 20s with a big bushy mustache, carried on working on the bike as he told me about his life before he became a partner there, when he worked for a catering firm. He would hear from his boss once every 2 weeks, and it would be a phone call in the morning of her either yelling at me or expressing disappointment, and then a phone call at the end of the night either yelling or expressing disappointment. But she had no idea what I was doing, so I never understood how she knew to be disappointed in me. Like a lot of people in standard jobs, he says, I would wake up stressed in the middle of the night. It was pretty bad. It was affecting everything. Here, he said, it works differently. At Baltimore Bicycle Works, they have a meeting every Thursday morning to discuss together the decisions they have to make as a business. They've divided the work of the business into seven different chunks, from marketing to servicing broken bikes. And everyone takes joint responsibility for at least 2 of them. If anyone has an idea for how to do something better or to stop doing something that's failing, they can propose it at that meeting. If somebody seconds it, they discuss it as a group and then they vote on it. So, for example, if somebody wants to start carrying a new brand of bicycles, that's the process they go through. There are 6 full partners in the business who all share the proceeds, and when I was there were also 3 apprentices who were spending a year as part of the process, and, if everyone felt they were a good fit, would then become full partners. At the end of each year, everyone does an annual review on everyone else. The goal is for everyone to feel equally committed to the cooperative and able to find a way to make the best contribution they possibly can to it. It was a tough job to set up a new business, and Meredith explained to me that she was working 10 hours a day every day for the first year. She had more responsibility in this job than in her old one, but Meredith noticed something surprising. After she'd been there a short time, that heart-thumping, wake-in-the-night anxiety went away, and it's never come back. I asked her, why? She has some ideas, and they fit closely with what I'd learned about the science of depression and anxiety earlier. Every previous job she had was, she says, an out-of-control experience. There, it didn't matter if you had a good idea. If that was outside of your job's scope, nobody was really interested in it. You got into your position and you did that job, you waited in line, and you would get promoted maybe after 5 years, and you did that next job for like 5 more years. But here, she says, her ideas, and everyone's ideas, count. I feel like it's different because if I have a good idea or want to explore something further, I feel like I have the liberty and the freedom to do that, and to see these ideas come to fruition. When she suggests a different publicity strategy, or figures out a mistake they've been making in fixing one particular kind of bike, or thinks of a whole new item to stock, it can happen, and she can see the results. As I sat with Meredith and watched the bike repairs happening all around us, I remembered what I had learned from Michael Marmot, the social scientist who carried out the research into British civil servants that showed the ways in which our work can make us sick, physically or mentally. He had explained to me, it's not the work itself that makes you sick, it's 3 other things. It's the feeling of being controlled, of being a meaningless cog in a system. It's the feeling that no matter how hard you work, you'll be treated just the same and nobody will notice. An imbalance, as he puts it, between efforts and rewards. And it's the feeling of being low on the hierarchy, of being a low-status person who doesn't matter compared to the big man in the corner office. Everyone at Baltimore Bicycle Works said they were dramatically happier, less anxious, and less depressed than they had been working in the kind of top-down organizations that dominate our society. But here's the thing that most fascinated me, and showed me a way beyond the obstacle I thought was insurmountable. The actual day-to-day work for most of the people here hasn't changed radically. The guys who fixed bikes before fix bikes now. The guys who did publicity before do publicity now. But changing the structure radically changed how they felt about the work itself. Josh, when I interviewed him on another day, told me why he thinks that is. I can certainly see depression and anxiety being related to the fact that people feel really, really confused and helpless. I think it's hard for people to live in a society where you have got no control over anything. You don't control your economic life from the standpoint that it's precarious whether you've got work at all, and then if you do have a job, you walk into the place, spend 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week in this place. You don't have free speech. You don't have any sort of voting. Anxiety and depression seem to him, he says, rational reactions to the situation, as opposed to some kind of biological break. This way of living and working, he explains, is an attempt to deal with that problem. When you have no say over your work, it becomes dead and meaningless. But when you control it, you can begin to infuse it with meaning. It becomes yours. And if there's something about the work that depresses you, you can argue for it to be broken up or alternated with something more meaningful, and you have a good chance of being listened to. This might sound like a pretentious way to describe a bike shop, but it seemed to me they had found a way of working that more closely resembled the participative tribes that human beings evolved to live in on the savannas of Africa millennia ago, one in which everyone is needed and everyone has a role that is meaningful to them. It also has lots of advantages those early humans didn't have. No large animals are going to come into Baltimore Bicycle Works and eat them, and they are going to live well beyond their 30s. This way of working provides, it occurred to me, several forms of reconnection at the same time. You are reconnected to your work because you feel you are choosing it, you can see the difference it makes, and you directly benefit from the work you do. You are reconnected to a sense of status. You aren't humiliated by having anyone order you around or tell you what to do. And you are reconnected to the future. Instead of knowing you could be fired any moment, you know where you'll be a year or 5 years from now if you choose it and keep working hard. Of course, they all told me they still have bad days. They have days when they have to prod each other to do something. They have days when they don't feel like being at work. There are aspects of the job that feel like a chore. One of the original partners explained that it felt like too much responsibility to be partly in charge of the whole business and went back to a more conventional office job. This isn't a magical solution. But when I started working here, I didn't have trouble sleeping anymore, Meredith says, and she's echoed by several of her colleagues. They also feel it's more efficient, that they literally have a better bike shop. In the old system, you have one person's brain on every problem, and he might listen to others if they're lucky. Here, you have 9 people's brains on every problem. At bars and parties, when Meredith tells people about this work, they're often incredulous. People are constantly amazed. They don't understand how you could possibly run a business like this, she explains. But she tells them everyone's been in a group environment. Everyone's been in a family or on a team. You know how it works. But all of a sudden, when you think about it in the context of making money or running a business, everyone's head explodes about it. But I don't feel like it's that complicated. People want it to be a lot more complicated than it really is. They can't even imagine how people would work together to make simple decisions. I like to explain that it's a democratic organization. This isn't a foreign concept. You live in America. We say we're a democracy, but people are so far removed from the concept. Our politicians are constantly singing hymns to democracy as the best system. This is simply the extension of democracy to the place where we spend most of our time. Josh says it's an amazing victory for their propaganda system, to make you work in an environment you often can't stand, and to do it for most of your waking life, and see the proceeds of your labor get siphoned off by somebody at the top, and then to make you think of yourself as a free person. Those people at parties tell Meredith that without a boss, everyone would just surely sit around doing nothing. But she explains the business is our livelihood, so if we all just sat around and did nothing, then it would be nothing and we would get nothing out of it. But she thinks it goes deeper than that. From this experience, she has learned that people want to work. Everybody wants to work. Everybody wants to feel useful and have purpose. The humiliation and control of so many workplaces can suppress that or drive it out of people, but it's always there, and it reemerges in the right environment. People want to feel like they've had an impact on other humans, that they've improved the world in some way. In fact, there's good evidence that this increases effectiveness in the long term. A major study by scientists at Cornell University investigated 320 small businesses. Half had top-down control, and half let the workers set their own agenda in a model that was closer to the democratic system at Baltimore Bicycle Works. The businesses closer to the democratic model grew, on average, 4 times more than the others. Why? Alex Tiku, who was still performing surgery on a bike, told me that here, for the first time, I feel proud of the work I do. Another one of the bike mechanics, Scott Myers, told me, it definitely feels very rewarding when you show up and see the building and don't think of it as the place where you come in to put your hours, but as the thing you've contributed to making. Sometimes, Meredith says, as we look out over the floor of bikes, she feels that we're on the beginning of a cultural change. Why would anyone work in the old way, the people at Baltimore Bicycle Works wonder, when they can take back control of their work and make it meaningful again? I learned that there are tens of thousands of democratic workplaces like Baltimore Bicycle Works all over the world. Several distinguished social scientists have tried to get grants to study what happens to your mental health in democratic workplaces, and they have all been turned down, so we don't have much data. But there is a large amount of evidence, as I discussed before, that feeling controlled and ordered around at work, and feeling you're at the bottom of a hierarchy, makes you more depressed and more anxious. It seems fair, then, to assume that a spread of cooperatives would have an antidepressant effect, although this is something that needs to be studied a whole lot more. I realized that this recipe for mental health could be distilled down to the 3 words that everyone in our culture instinctively understands. Elect your boss. Work wouldn't be an ordeal that's done to you, something to endure. It'd be a democratic tribe that you are part of, and that you control as much as anyone else. One of the most popular political slogans of the past few years has been "Take Back Control." People are right to connect with this slogan. They have lost control, and they long to regain it. But that slogan has been used by political forces, like those backing Brexit or Donald Trump, that will give them even less control. This, I came to think, is a way to reclaim that slogan and help people to gain what they are rightly hungering for. Before I left her for the last time, Meredith told me that she believes this longing for meaningful work, to have a say over what you spend most of your life doing, is there, just below the surface, in everyone. Happiness is really feeling like you've impacted another human positively. I think a lot of people want their work to be like that, she said. And she looked around the workplace she built and controls with her colleagues. Then she looked back at me and said, you know? And that's that chapter. So that for me is a really interesting chapter, because like I said, guys, that connects a lot to a lot of ideas that I've had in mind for a long time. I think that I've done a limited amount, but a non-zero amount of research about democratic workplaces and how they operate and how cooperatives work. There's a cooperative in Spain, I think, called the Mondragon. I think it's the Mondragon cooperative. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but there's a large cooperative in Spain that is very successful. There's a cooperative called the Cooperative in the UK, which is very successful as well. I'm not honestly sure to what extent the cooperative is a cooperative, because I know that it's just a chain of supermarkets, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm not sure how much democratic control is exerted in that workplace. But it's a really interesting chapter, and I hope that that's going to, that sort of concept of not having workplaces that operate in this authoritarian sort of way. I hope that that's going to become more of a part of our cultural dialogue as we move forward into the remainder of the 21st century. We're 20% of the way through the 21st century. We're 1/5 of the way through the 21st century. But yeah, really interesting stuff, I think. Really enjoying this book, and we still have a few chapters left to go. I think we're at about page 210-ish of 270, so we've got 60 pages or so to go. Take a few more streams to get through that. I hope we'll get through it by the end of the year. I think we will. But anyway, guys, that is our first couple of hours of stream for today. Pretty much wrapped. We're going to be back. It's now 1 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to be back in 2 hours from now. We're going to be back at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be playing some PS5 games. We're going to be playing Spider-Man Miles Morales. We're going to be starting that game from the beginning. We haven't played that game before yet. We just finished Spider-Man Remastered. We're playing Miles Morales from the beginning today. So if you want to see that game, every Monday, it's going to be for the next few weeks, every Monday we're going to be playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, 3 p.m. Pacific time. So guys, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you're having a good Monday. I hope you continue to have a good Monday. And I will be back in a couple of hours, so please join me then. I'm going to go grab some lunch, take a shower, all these kinds of day-to-day things that I got to get done. But yeah, I'll be back in a couple hours. Thanks, guys. Take care.